been looking at based on some feedback that we've received from both the public, development community, as well as internal staff and conversations that we've had. Just want to let everyone kind of know these are intended to be relatively minor changes that hopefully will have a relatively large impact on either processes or certain development types and things of that sort within the city of Tucson. So with that, I'm going to, actually, before any of that, I'm gonna actually just introduce myself real quickly. I'm Dan Bursick. I am the section manager for code development. We have a few other staff members from the city of Tucson here. We have Cora Manning. She is the planning administrator for the planning and development services. Acacia Dupierre, who is a lead planner for planning and development services and code development. Carver Struve as well, who is a principal planner with planning and development services. And I think Nicholas Martell is also here as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Acacia. She's going to go through kind of an intro, get everyone kind of updated on where we've been, and then we'll talk a little bit about the proposal. Thank you. Oh, additionally, one more thing, sorry. We do have a comment form, so if you have comments related to this, feel free to fill that out. I'm going to put that in the chat. And then also there is the chat. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to utilize the chat as we go through with this. There will be discussion points throughout, and we'll kind of let you know when those are. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for spending your time with us. Yeah, just to kick it off, as you may know, this code update initiative was started at a mayor and council meeting in June, where staff was directed to take kind of a new approach in improving parts of the city's development code. That actually includes a range of documents that I'll cover in just a little bit. But the process has included research, outreach, and starting today, public meetings to review a package of proposed updates in these themed areas. That includes improving planning and development service processes, removing barriers to small scale infill, simplifying some development standards, and some general error corrections. And development of this proposal package has included outreach to stakeholder groups, including neighborhoods and representatives from development. We also got feedback from the staff perspective, both in our department and elsewhere. And we were super impressed to see such engagement through an online survey where we had over 130 responses. The questions there included, what suggestions do you have to improve City of Tucson development codes? Do you know what sections of the code your suggestion pertains to? And what kind of benefits do you think your suggestion will have? So we've reviewed all those comments and they are actually posted on the project webpage. And so while there's lots of great ideas, through this iterative process, we've narrowed down this proposal package. And we really hope this is a productive first chance at this kind of proposal. Because we have record of all the comments and would like to consider them in the future, perhaps in a similar kind of initiative. So as I mentioned, over 130 responses were noted. The self-noted benefit areas tallied up in this way, with the majority favoring transparency and clarity in our development processes. Many respondents saw that these codes have effects in more than one or multiple benefits, which is a great framework for trying to make significant impact with thoughtful sort of incremental steps. Just to touch on some other themes, people highlighted high quality built environments, reduced costs, especially regarding affordable housing, less time, less steps, and of course, improving our climate resiliency. And just a sample of the comments, though, as I mentioned, all 130 plus are online, and we'll share that link again to the project page at the end of the presentation. And we'll have feedback on why some portions went ahead and some weren't feasible at this time. But just to kind of note, there were requests ranging from simplifying lot line adjustments to considering digital conveniences in applications and highlighting the existing barriers to potential more housing types. And just a few more comments, just to get the range of this, including requests for more predictable setback requirements, lots of comments about parking and the ripple effects of those requirements, and support for affordable housing incentives. So I mentioned that the proposal package affects more than one document, and each of these has its own amendment process. So the Unified Development Code up there in pink, also the UDC, it's our nickname for it, is kind of the main one. Its intentions are both to protect and promote health and safety and welfare, and it also guides policies of the general plan. Which shout out, the Plan Tucson update kickoff is next Thursday evening if you're able to attend, or keep an eye out for materials coming from that whole process starting then. But back here to the UDC, it has the most steps to amend it, requiring mayor and council initiation only. And it requires 2 public hearings, both at the Planning Commission and the mayor and council, and that's in addition to public outreach. Right there in the middle, the admin manual is like a supplement to the UDC. It establishes application requirements, procedures, and fees. It can be amended upon mayor and council, city manager, or an applicable director initiation, and the decision is made by that director. And the last one, the technical manual, establishes just that, the technical standards for access, grading, utilities, and other elements like that. Amendments can be initiated by those same 3, mayor and council, city manager, or a director. It does include a city development review committee recommendation in the outreach phase, and it's ultimately decided by the city manager. And then just to see those amendment steps laid out for each document, here's the UDC process, including specific outreach for different types of amendments, the hearings with both Planning Commission and mayor and council. Just quickly, I'll do the admin manual has fewer steps. The city manager or director can initiate in addition to mayor and council, and the decision falls with the director. And then lastly, for the tech manual, each of the 3 can initiate. Outreach includes and requires the input of the City Development Review Committee I mentioned, the CDRC, and the city manager makes that decision. So in each proposal, we've noted which document it falls under, both here in this presentation and in a summary posted online. So you can get an idea of the next steps in each case if they do move forward. So I'll hand it back over to Dan at this point to go over the proposal in more detail.
Great. Thanks, Acacia. Appreciate it. The current code update proposal in front of you, as we had mentioned, so this is really an update to improve development codes and proposed amendments. So as Acacia had mentioned, it really goes mainly in the Unified Development Code, which is our zoning code, but also we have some proposals in parts of technical standards, administrative manual as well. The proposal seeks to make updates around improving PDSD processes, removing barriers to small scale infill, simplify development standards, and small minor code errors. And we're going to organize those as we go through them into those categories and discuss them. So what we have here is really the code update proposal and then meeting structure. We have color coded those kind of similarly to Acacia had set up the process. So those in the kind of purplish, magenta, maroonish color are related to the Unified Development Code. Those in the kind of orangish, burnt orangish color are more of the admin manual. And then the bluish color is more a technical standards manual. There are 6 proposal areas within the improved PDSD processes related to, one is related to an administrative special exception for water well upgrades. Another one's related to PDSD decision process for wireless communication facilities that are co-located. Another one's related to zoning examiner legislative procedure for major change of condition. We're going to go through each of these individually. And those are in the UDC. Admin manual looking at development package requirements for smaller projects, as well as just some housekeeping items related to EVSE requirements and inventory for parking calculations. And then aligning the time frame for grading permits with development packages so they're similar. Once we're done with that, we'll have feedback and discussion, and then move on to the next one, which is removing barriers to small scale infill. This is related to setback requirements for townhomes. We're looking at parking requirements for small multifamily residential, as well as accessory structures in front yards for shade and carports. Again, have feedback and discussion related to those 3 items, and then move on to the next category, which is simplifying development standards. And this is discussion related to standardized building setbacks and major streets and routes. Have a little more feedback and discussion, and talk a little bit about the minor code errors. Just related to those minor code errors, want to mention those really are supposed to be non-substantive issues. They're things that have come up in our review that could be something has the wrong address related to a park, or it is just that the reference is incorrect, or it's referring to something that doesn't exist. So we'll go through some examples of what those are, and then have a little bit more discussion. Excuse me, sorry. Just going over really quickly on how the proposal was chosen. Ooh, excuse me, I'm the water. So anyway, the following criteria was really used to choose the 10 proposal updates. First is really overall impact on development process. So we looked at it and looked at the proposal, and then kind of judged, how much of an impact would this potentially have on that process, as far as potentially reducing confusion, clarifying things, or reducing, unnecessary processes, that type of thing. We also looked on results in reduction of staff resources to review or potentially administer. So those resources can potentially be shifted elsewhere to other items. We looked at minimal negative impacts on existing development and property. So again, a lot of these, just to point out, and I think Acacia had mentioned this previously, is that we want to make sure these are kind of relatively minor changes. They're not really large scale changes that would potentially require kind of an individual item related to it. So minimal negative impacts on existing development and properties. And this is really what we're looking for here, is really the low hanging fruit within our code to help with this type of thing. And then the third is legal feasibility of proposal. And this goes back to kind of that comment that we saw earlier related to commercial lot splits. There have been suggestions to look at our process for commercial lot splits and try to mirror what the county does related to those. Just kind of the legal feasibility of that, we believe, is challenging. In fact, it may not be allowed by state law, because there are different requirements for commercial lot splits within the county versus municipalities and cities like the city of Tucson. So legal feasibility was one of the things we looked at. We do want to just let you know that the remaining suggestions will be added to an ongoing list for future code update packages. Some of those larger projects are really larger policy decisions and larger issues that really warrant their own discussion. Some of those comments related to revisions to the flexible lot development regulations, moving parking minimums. We actually had several comments related to removing parking minimums and adjusting whole-scale parking standard changes, removing all discretionary processes, or even climate items like the rewrite of the commercial water harvesting ordinance. Those are all really larger projects and larger policy decisions that could be directed by mayor and council, and that we would likely have an individual conversation on instead of packing them together like this. So the first one to discuss related to improving PDSD processes, and this is to allow administrative exception for certain water well upgrades. So as it is right now, water well upgrades require the upgrade to go through a zoning examiner special exception process. This requires a full review, it requires a neighborhood meeting, and then it also requires a public hearing with the zoning examiner. It's an extensive process. And in a lot of cases, in fact, all the cases that we've seen, very minimal changes are occurring to those upgrade sites. So this here is an example on their screen here. This is all existing essentially. So this is the existing outline of the work area. All of the pink portions are light pink portions are existing features. And then the only really new change happening here is they're upgrading equipment in this little magenta portion. And then they're replacing it with a new shade structure, which is exactly the same height as it was. And it's actually smaller than it was previously, leading to actually less of a visual impact on the area. Water has a lot of these and really needs to be able to upgrade their facilities. So this helps to, we're looking for ways to help support public utility function, as well as kind of remove unnecessary steps for staff or for the city. So the proposal in front of you would be to allow water well upgrades within certain thresholds, 100-foot notice. So it still has notice, but it would be reducing that so the input can occur still, so people are aware, but it would minimize the extensive process that was currently required. One thing to note here is that new sites still go through the special exception process with notification. So this is only for upgrades. The second item is related to removing the PDSD director decision process for wired communication facilities that are co-located. So as it is right now, we require a director's decision process for wireless communication facilities in addition to standard zoning and building review processes. This potentially extends the time frame and conflicting with federal shop requirements, and there are about 40 or 50 of these that we receive annually. We did a review of these back to 2018. There were no site-specific conditions that were added to the approvals, and we didn't really receive any feedback related to them, suggesting that the standard zoning review is adequate for them. One thing I do want to notice is that the goal here really is to allow for these co-locations so you don't have new towers popping up. So by allowing for these co-locations, it reduces the total number of poles and the total visual impact within the city of Tucson, and helps with that, kind of help incentivize them to co-locate instead of going through that full process for a new pole. I do want to also mention this doesn't apply or would not apply the proposal to new towers, or it does not have anything to do with those new 5G facilities that you see in the right of way that are the telephone pole. Those are regulated by Department of Transportation and Mobility, and they're also heavily regulated by the state and the federal government as well. Number 3 in this section is related to requiring the zoning examiner procedure for a major change of condition. This was directed by council on a December 7th study session. This proposal would align with a process for a major change of condition with those similar processes. So right now, a major change of condition for a planned area development, major mayor and council special exception, or a zoning examiner special exception, all are required to go through the full zoning examiner legislative procedure. The only one that doesn't is the major change of condition for a rezoning. And what ends up happening is it basically goes straight to mayor and council for a public hearing. The goal here is to make sure that the public has enough time to learn about the project and provide their input so that can be resolved prior to making its way to that public hearing with mayor and council. It does have a pretty overall limited applicability. There are about 1 to 3 of these annually in our review of the last 5 years or so. However, about a third of them end up being significantly, kind of controversial issues or difficult processes that could really help the neighborhood meeting as well as the public hearing with the zoning examiner. Number 4 in our improved PDSD processes is related to reduced development package requirements for smaller projects. So we have heard a lot of feedback related to this one. As far as just why do we require so much for something as simple as just, putting in a fence? So we are going through and creating 2 paths for applicants. You still have to do a development package, but reduced requirements for simple projects, such as fences, walls, sheds, solar canopies, And then a full set of requirements for those more complex requirements are projects such as items related to new construction, complete renovations of existing buildings, things of that sort. So creating really two paths and not requiring a full development package for something really simple like a fence. The fifth one, this one is pretty simple as well. This is related to electric vehicle supply equipment. This is really just for to help with confusion when you move between the development package process and the building permit process. And this would be requiring essentially a note on both your development package and building permit that would show your calculations related to the new electric vehicle supply equipment requirements. So again, helping with the implementation of those new regulations to make sure that something isn't missing between those two processes. And then the final one in this group is related to aligning the time frame for grading permits with development packages. So as it is right now, development packages are valid for 3 years. And they have a timeline for that. Grading permits, however, expire after 6 months. So you come in, get your approval for the grading permit. What we're seeing is a lot of times they bump up against that 6 months prior to getting to that point. And then they have to come in and just file for an extension. Extension request is granted, et cetera, but it's a full process that may not be necessary because still they still meet all the requirements of the development package. So the goal here would be to change the time frame for grading permits to 3 years so that they align, so you wouldn't have that unnecessary need to come in for an extension on that. With that, those first 6 related to the approval of the PDSD processes. I want to just stop for a second and see if anyone has any comments or questions related to those first 6. Feel free to raise your hand, or if the hand feature isn't working, you can unmute yourself and speak. Oh, it looks like Lori, I saw your hand go up.
There you go.
There you go.
Is any of this going to be related to the Tanque Verde Valley specifically?
No, this is so Lori, this is related to just process improvements within our Unified Development Code.
Okay.
So yeah, this is not specifically related to that project.
Okay, I'm going to exit then.
Okay, thanks for joining us. We appreciate
The city of Tucson has its own development code. Everything in unincorporated Pima County would follow Pima County codes.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Anyone else with any comments or questions?
Excuse me, yes. The development package, what will that entail? I mean, as far as review time?
Let's see if Nicholas Martell, who's been working on that, might have a better understanding if he doesn't mind kind of responding to that.
Regarding review time, I'm not sure that we've discussed what that would entail with actually expediting, but I do know some of the minor development packages are much easier to review and have not discussed yet how that would affect a time frame.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Nick.
Yep.
Dan?
Yes.
Allison here.
Hi, Allison. How you doing?
Thank you. Hi. Great. Did you, I might have missed it because I unfortunately joined a little bit late. Did you already review the schedule of how these are going to be moving forward? Are they going to the Planning Commission? Are they going straight to Mayor and Council? And do you have a schedule for that?
Yes, Allison. So we do have a next steps that kind of shows the schedule moving forward. The UDC amendments would be going to Planning Commission for a study session on January 25th. And then the admin manual and tech manual don't have to go to the Planning Commission, so those would likely be on a separate track. But the goal, I think, depending on feedback and depending on the review, is looking at Mayor and Council review in March.
Thank you so much. So it sounds like end of March, beginning of April, maybe both of these items will be wrapped up and we should have some more predictability and consistency with the code.
Yeah, as of now, that's the tentative timeline moving forward. So, yep,
I got one more
Thank
question.
you so much.
And
of course,
Uh,
most definitely.
the development package for smaller projects, who defines that, or how is that defined? I mean, when we have a remodel of a building and we add a sidewalk, we've been going through full development packages, or add a wall, a screen wall, and these take months to review. How is that going to work? I mean, it seems to me all we need is a record site plan for some of these minor changes.
Yeah, so Evan, so we're working on a proposal to have them in two different buckets, essentially, with some guidance on that would go into our administrative manual. If you have suggestions on that, please feel free to either, you send us an email related to that with your comments, or I do have that comment form, which I'll put back in the chat, and we can look at that while we're finalizing that proposal, which the final documents will likely be presented to Planning Commission on that January 25th date.
Thank you.
Of course.
Dan, it's Ben here. Could you expound upon the electric vehicle supply equipment and the parking calculations? What does that actually mean? Thank you.
Of course. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Ben. So all it really is making a change to the admin manual requiring a note in your development package plans, as well as your building permit plans, or building construction documents, essentially, just putting in your calculation. So when the reviewers are looking at them, they can make sure that they're matching and that they're there. It's an account. It's basically it's making it easier and for things not to be lost. And so we can kind of bridge that gap between the development package zoning review and the building review.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Okay. All right. If there are any other questions, I'm going to move on to the next one. Thank you for their comments. Appreciate it. So remove barriers to small scale infill. So we have 3 of these, and the first one that we are looking at and proposing is related to removing setback requirements between townhouse units. So as it is, the required setbacks to townhomes make it really challenging to build townhomes. Adjustments are only possible through additional approval processes. So you can do so potentially by making it a condo and then doing a split and making it in, basically you do multifamily then make it into condos, or you can potentially do it through a flexible lot development, but there's, because of the internal setbacks, it makes it very challenging. This is part of the reason why we're not seeing many townhomes within the city of Tucson. It's much easier to develop multifamily units that are similar to townhomes as it is right now than it is to develop just the kind of single family attached townhomes. So what we are proposing is that in zones that allow for multifamily, so R2 and higher, not R1, we would look to allow for single family attached dwellings. And then we would clarify that the interior setbacks do not apply between the units for that. This helps to facilitate the development of townhomes. It's a type of missing middle housing that and different scale of housing that we don't currently have a lot of. It allows for more efficient use of sites, and it also removes a process it removes an unnecessary process for something that we're already kind of allowing, but just through kind of a weird workaround. So yeah, just related to Josue's comment here, can you explain the difference between townhome and condo? But yeah, so a condo would essentially be like part of a condo association. So you have really it's a little different organizational structure versus the single family attached where you would actually own that land that's right there related to it. Okay, next one for remove barriers to small infill. Second one is to reduce parking requirements for small family, multifamily residential. This is related to commercial parking standards and that they're triggered on sites with 3 or more residences. What ends up happening is that this requires more space dedicated to not only landscaping, but surface requirements that lead to heat island effect problems, access and maneuvering requirements. It's very challenging. Again, we're looking at, again, the middle housing and those kind of middle units, the smaller multifamily units, and what some of those barriers are that we're currently seeing. And the commercial parking standards for those smaller projects is making it challenging. So the proposal that we are looking at here is to look at those small units, 2 to 5. We would require 1 parking space per unit for sites. Additionally, it would allow for flexibility within those standards, such as things like alley access and alternate surface requirements. Those would need to be required, be approved by the city attorney or Department of Transportation and Mobility, make sure it doesn't cause any access problems, make sure that there are certain surface requirements. So if you don't pave it, but they need to make sure that it's a dust-free surface, that it stays in place, that it's appropriate for the type of traffic that would be utilizing that. We are also looking at potentially with the proposal, the reduction of parking area lane that is greater than 5%, but you would have to get approval of Tucson Fire to make sure that there are no safety issues related to that. And then looking at the PDMR allowance, which allows for modification of up to 20% instead of 10%. The 10%, that's modification of parking number spaces. So 10% of 5 spaces is nothing. So that's the reason why that would be shifted to 20% essentially. I just want to address a couple things related to parking. This would not affect the items related to group dwelling ordinance. So you still have to have extra parking if you go over 5 bedrooms in R1. It would still need to meet commercial standards if you go over 5 spaces. It's just an adjustment to the number of spaces potentially required for those small multifamily units. And then the third one is related to accessory structures in the front yards for shade carports. So this is one of those items that we receive a lot of requests for, and we end up sending to our Board of Adjustment for variances quite often. Basically in the Unified Development Code, the front yard shade protection is restricted to structures attached to the main building or limited through the variance procedure. So a couple examples of projects that either have gone through the variance procedures are the 2 that are on the slide. There's this one on the left here that has the shade structure for the carport. And then this is another one. This is actually in my neighborhood, went to Board of Adjustment last year. They wanted to put a solar shade structure up in their lot. So they went through the Board of Adjustment approval process. So what we're looking at is to allow for shade accessory structures to go through the building review process if there are certain size and dimensions in the front yard that aren't attached. So what we're looking at is limiting it to 400 feet, it's basically 2 car spaces, and then limiting it only to shade structures and carports, but allowing for that. The goal here really is to allow for flexibility and adding climate appropriate shade protection for people, their property, and making it so they don't have to necessarily go through that full variance process. There are some, we have heard a bit of concern about materials and things of that sort, because it is required to go through the building permit process. We believe that would help to limit really the quality of the materials needed. And along with it is reviewed for the safety requirements that go along with permitting structures. So instead of that shade sail that someone may have gotten from Costco and putting it up in their front yard to shade their vehicle, you would get an actual designed structure that meets all of the kind of load calculation requirements and things of that sort. So those are the three related to barriers to small scale infill. And I'm going to stop really quickly right here and see if anybody has any comments related to these. Looks like Bill has his hand up.
Hey, you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
The shade structure at 400 square feet might be limiting. You may need more shade than just over the exact parking car. And so take a look at that. If you have 2 stacked spaces, you may need like 480 square feet for that. So I would not limit the square footage, but I would try to say, you know, providing shade for up to 2 cars or something like that. I know that makes it too gray for you guys. The other one is the parking for the small multifamily residential. Just to make sure that maneuverability is not required, or that for these units between 2 and 5 that you kind of have the same development regulations that you have for parking for a single family house, where you can just kind of show it on a site plan and be done with it. You know, that you can have tandem parking and that you don't have to maneuver on site. I just want to make sure that gets part of that code. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Any other comments or questions related to these three? Okay. All right. Move on to the next one then. Hearing nothing. Okay, so the 10th one is related to simplifying of development standards. So this is looking at standardizing building setbacks on major streets and routes. So this is something we received a lot of comments, both from the developers who are trying to utilize the code, understand kind of what is required from our code, but also from our review staff as well, the complexity of trying to administer that code. So as it is right now, it's really a confusing process related to a couple different things. There are these developing and established areas that are based on traffic counts, type of roads, as well as the future right-of-way within those major streets and routes. When you take that and you combine it with variable setbacks along these corridors, you end up with a very unpredictable situation, both in urban design, but also in just kind of understanding what the requirements of the code are. So what we're looking at doing here is really simplifying, and it's really related to the front setback along major corridors, but looking to standardize the front setback dimensions along major streets based on whether it's residential or non-residential development instead of building height. This helps to encourage a more predictable, improved built environment and allows for better utilized sites. So the goal would be a 20-foot setback for residential and then a 10-foot setback for commercial instead of that variable setback from the front. What ends up happening and what we've seen is that when you have the variable setback and you have this kind of process, it leads to a situation like you have on the left here with the parking in the front, sea of asphalt, and then the building getting pushed all the way to the back. And then when you're walking on the sidewalk with some shade, but not a ton, you're also kind of submitted, you're kind of, that you have like the urban heat island effect from all the pavement. It's not a very welcoming environment for pedestrians or for kind of just urban design principles. The goal here really is to set up a situation that allows for the building to come to the front, creating more of that pedestrian environment and that good urban design like you have on the right related to that. This has been something that I think has led to not only those two situations, but a variable setback as you go down a lot of our streets to where there isn't a consistency of how far back buildings are set. So it leads to this kind of view of the area that becomes not just the roadway in front of you, but the roadway and then this wide open kind of sea of asphalt that we see. So this would hopefully help with predictability of our code, as well as urban design, and help with the pedestrian environment is what the goal of this proposal would be. So kind of related to that, I want to stop right here real quickly and see if anybody has any questions or comments related to this one as well. It is a pretty, as it is right now, a pretty complex way of dealing with building setbacks along major corridors. Lexi, it looks like you have your hand up.
Good morning, Dan. Hey, just a quick question as it relates to these setbacks. Are we also looking at, because is this just applicable to major streets and routes, or is it just any when you're adjacent to any street? And then are we also looking at modifying the rest of the setback table where it's based on building height to just say a standard, setback treatment there?
Thanks, Lexi. I appreciate the comment. So this is just looking at major routes, and this is the front setbacks from those major routes. The conversation related to a lot of our setbacks, especially setbacks in residential areas, is one that is really a larger conversation because there's privacy mitigation things related to that, and a whole lot. It's a much different situation. So this is really just addressing kind of the urban environment related to those major corridors. I have a feeling there is likely going to be some amendments that are going to go along to the full major streets and routes plan. And that'll probably lead to additional conversations related to other amendments related to this.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Hey, Dan, it's Chuck.
I can't hear you right now, and I see some sort of green thing on your screen.
Oh,
there we go.
Isn't there the street perimeter yard? Between this building and the right away, the landscape.
Yeah, so Chuck, I believe, and Elisa is here as well. She can probably correct me if I'm incorrect. So the goal was, I think what we're looking at for the proposal is to have a 10-foot setback along the major route, and that would incorporate that typical 10-foot landscape buffer that you would see there for that street setback.
I guess your example on your slide doesn't show that, so it shows the building right on the sidewalk.
I will say there aren't a lot of examples of what we want to do, primarily because the code won't allow it. When we get that future situation, we can show that.
Okay, well, I just didn't want to show an example that's not correct, I guess.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, that's the idea of it, not necessarily exactly what would end up being developed.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions related to this one? Okay, move on. And then the final category really are these minor code errors and corrections. So we've done a few of these in the past. We haven't done one recently, but as we administer the code, things come up that just don't make a lot of sense. So this is really cleaning up some of those that we've had come up over the past couple of years. So some examples of these are, this first one, 4.8-1. So protective services, government owned and operated only. is currently not prohibited in our, but is allowed in pretty much every other zone in the code. Believe it was an omission because it was actually allowed in the land use code, but never made its way over to the Unified Development Code. So going through and making sure that that's clear and putting that and making that amendment. Another example is section 4.9.7.d.2.a. The use table omitted a use specific standard, which is 497E1 for home occupation daycare. So making sure that that reference is added back in. Another one's just kind of related to a reference to 497J11 for shelter care victims of domestic violence. There is no use specific standard 497J11. It basically says it says 1 through 11. It really should have been 1 through 10. So making that amendment. We did a couple amendments to our notification area back probably 3 years ago. And there were a couple references to the previous notification distance that weren't updated at the time that we had missed. So making sure that those are updated. So 500 to 100 and 300 to 400. And then things like in our admin manual, there are some addresses to some of the parks, such as the Miramonte Natural Resources Park, that just aren't correct. It's the wrong address. So going in and making sure that those are correct and made clear moving forward. So those are the minor errors, and there's about maybe 10 or 12 of those, just kind of cleaning things up that will be included for clarity. So with that, just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the timeline and the next steps related to this. So as you can see, there's kind of 3 different tracks related to this. So the majority of our changes were in the Unified Development Code, and that is that top process. And so, started off around June 6th or June 7th with Mayor and Council directing us. We've been going through and meeting internally and working on the proposal. Today we have our public meeting, and from that and from the feedback we received here, and on Thursday, we will amend our proposal, and then the goal is to go to Planning Commission for a study session to introduce them to this item on January 25th, and then looking at a public hearing with the Planning Commission in February for that. And then depending on the review and the recommendation, we're looking at March to be in front of Mayor and Council for another public hearing. We do encourage you to join us for those meetings. We plan on taking our list of people that have joined us here, making sure that they're aware as we move forward of all of these different steps that we take. Related to the administrative manual and tech manual, those are on a different track. We will present this as a package to our Planning Commission so they can provide comment on it, but those will likely be done just on a separate track. They take a little less time, but the feedback that we receive will also be included within that and that final package with Mayor and Council. Looks like have hand up from David Robinson.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question. Is the city also planning proposed guideline changes this year for in conjunction with the climate action plan, Tucson Resilient Together? And if so, do you foresee sort of another round of this kind of process?
So there's, I think there will be direction related to the climate action plan that will lead to additional code amendments. It probably won't be something related to something like this. This is generally, we're trying to keep it as a little more minor than some of the changes that may be needed and may come out of the climate action plan. But yes, that will be a future effort, making changes to our code to reflect that plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we're actually working on some code amendments right now related to water conservation measures.
Yeah.
So there will be more information about that very soon. We're actually planning to potentially hold some meetings in February on that. And we'll be providing mayor and council an update in late February on where we are with those measures. And so this is a kind of package of amendments related to landscaping, outdoor water use, as well as indoor water use, with a potential change to our building code to require water sense fixtures. So this is a set of amendments that was directed by mayor and council last fall that we've been working on, and we will have more information on that very shortly. So if you haven't already, please sign up for our newsletter, and you'll get more information about that as it becomes available, and check back on our website.
If you have just the sign up link, that would be great if you could put it in the chat. Thank you.
Great, excellent. So, all right, and then I think just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Oh, sorry, looks like Chuck, you have your hand up.
I was just wondering if the non-planning commission items are going to be approved before the commission approves the other items, or is that? Your time didn't show approval dates for those.
Yeah, so it is entirely possible that those could be approved prior. I think we want to get the feedback from the planning commission prior to moving them forward. But then once we get some feedback from the planning commission, we'll likely move those forward with the process, and then they could potentially be approved in February or March as well.
The admin manual and tech manual, you're looking for comments from the planning commission for those two, or is that what you said? Or?
Yeah, I think so. The goal was that we were going to present it as a package to the planning commission, and then they can provide additional feedback to what we're getting from our public meetings, and we would incorporate that potentially in that process.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thanks everyone. We appreciate it. So just want to reiterate, there's an online comment card, so feel free to fill out any comments or suggestions or questions related to this. We do have an additional in-person meeting coming up on Thursday. So it's Thursday, January 12th from 5:30 to 7 o'clock. This is at the Sentinel Building, which is at 310 North Commerce Park Loop. It's just west of I-10, kind of north, I guess, between, what is it? Between, I guess it's Congress and St. Mary's, over that area over there. And then if you'd like to RSVP for that meeting, we have a form for that as well. And then we finally, we just have a project webpage related to this as well. And we'll put all of those in the, looks like Acacia's already done it. Put all those links in the chat so you can access them. And I think that's it. If anyone has any additional comments or questions related to this, happy to take those. Otherwise, really appreciate all of your feedback and your time that you've spent with us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Appreciate it.